All right, so we can go ahead and kick it off. We're right at the 3:32 mark. To get things started, my name is Drea Alfonso, and I am a program manager on our Google for Education team. And I am humbled and excited to kick off this very timely EDU on Air panel on racial justice and the impact on education. We have four very esteemed leaders who are joining us today who are driving efforts in this space from a corporate level, community level, and even from a district and classroom level. So in the time that we have today, wanted to first start by providing some context into how our philanthropic arm, Google.org, is supporting these leaders and their organizations. And we'll get the scoop from that from Justin Steele from our Google.org team. Then that will be followed by introductions from our speakers who will give us a little bit more insights into the work that they are spearheading on this space. And then we'll jump right into our discussion around the question around, even with access to the best technology, does that ensure every student succeeds? And with the remaining time that we do have available, we'll then hop into some Q&A at the end from the audience. All right, so Justin, you've been working on our Google.org giving campaign on racial justice for the past few years. So can you give some folks insights into, or just some context into why that was started and how it touches education?
Yeah, for sure. So thank you, Drea, and everyone who's tuned in. It's good to be with you today. As Drea said, my name is Justin Steele. I'm a principal on the Google.org team. Now, Google.org is responsible for the philanthropy of Google, and we give over $100 million in cash grants each year across the globe on a number of topics. And most of my work is focused here in the United States. And 2 years ago, we did a strategy sort of deep dive where we were really looking at access to opportunity. I mean, one of Google's core values is equal participation in society, and we care a lot about making sure that everybody has an opportunity to participate and achieve their full potential. And as we dug into that in the US, and particularly out in our home market at the Bay Area, we found that we couldn't ignore race as a factor in access to opportunity. In particular, we found that systemic and structural racial inequity were really preventing a lot of young people from being able to achieve their full potential. And so we started a dedicated giving portfolio at Google.org focused on the topic of racial justice. We decided to focus that philanthropy both on education and criminal justice reform. And within the educational space, we were really looking for a combination of organizations who both were deeply rooted in the community, unapologetically and explicitly focused on racial equity, but were also really working at the systems level. They had an opportunity to be innovative, to scale their work. And we're really lucky to have 3 of those early grantees with us today, the founders of each of the organizations, Beyond 12 with Alex Bernadotte, Oakland Unified School District's African American Male Achievement Program and Chris Chapman, and then the Roses in Concrete Community School with Jeff Duncan Andrade. So 3 of our early grantees were really excited, and I'm going to stop talking because I really want to hear what they have to say on these deep questions.
Okay, cool. So Alex, we'll kick it off to you to tell us more about what you've been working on.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin, and thank you, Drea. My name is Alex Bernadotte. I am the founder and CEO of an organization called Beyond 12. We are a national technology-based nonprofit, and our mission is to significantly increase the number of students from under-resourced communities and students of color who graduate from our nation's colleges and universities. Working in partnerships with high schools and colleges, our innovative alumni tracking platform, as well as our college coaches, together provide students with the academic, social, and emotional support they need to succeed in higher education and beyond. Today, we are tracking the progress of about 40,000 college students, and we're coaching close to 3,000 students on college campuses across the US. So thank you again. I'm excited to have this dialogue, and I will pass it on.
All right. Jeff, you're up next. Oops, you might be muted.
Okay, let's try again.
There we go.
This is about technology, right?
Yeah.
Greetings, everyone. I am the founder and board chair of the Roses and Concrete Community School, which is a school that we founded in East Oakland about a year and a half ago. We opened as a K-4 school that is a dual immersion and also designed as a lab school to, we specifically lab around three things. We lab around curriculum, we lab around pedagogy, and we lab around people. And the idea of the lab is to really use the original concept of the charter to begin to dive into what it is that schools, what kind of hard pivot schools need to make to really become equitable spaces that are truly community responsive. I've been a teacher in my community. This is my 22nd year. And we opened the school really as an effort to deliver on a promise that that schools in our city and frankly nationally haven't really been able to deliver on, which is an idea of both a curriculum and a pedagogy that is responsive to the material conditions of students' lives. And that includes definitely at the core in our community what it means to develop a curriculum that that really does provide racial justice, a sense of identity and self-esteem and self-love, beginning with the student, but also thinking about then what it means to grow a group of young people. We refer to our students as warrior scholars, what it means to grow a generation of young people in our community that don't use school as a way to escape poverty, but actually begin to understand that the real purpose of education is to end poverty. So a big part of our mission is creating a pipeline of young people that come out of our community and do go off to four-year colleges and universities, if that makes sense to them. But then that pathway is really meant to be a pathway back to serve and transform the things that are happening in our community that all of us are tired of and uneasy with, but a lot of the solutions are coming externally, and we're really designed as an educational organization that's trying to grow our own and transform our own community.
Great. All right. Chris?
Thank you. Greetings, everybody. Chris Chapman, Founding Executive Director of African American Male Achievement for Oakland Unified School District. I'll talk a little bit about that work and then how that evolved into the Office of Equity. In 2010, we had recently come out of, the district came out of state receivership and just acquired a new superintendent, Dr. Tony Smith, who began to disaggregate all of the data as a system and looked at that data through a racial equity lens. And what he concluded was the Oakland Unified School District actually was creating the conditions that was exacerbating the achievement gap and really fueling the school to prison pipeline. And as opposed to locating the problem with the child, he located the problem with the ecosystem. I was blessed to then come into the system and really from just an idea, get boots on the ground and take this moment and make it a movement by really addressing the kind of institutional racism that pushes out Black boys from preschool through 12th grade. The areas of which that we were looking to address academic achievement were around literacy, improving literacy rates for African-American male students, improving graduation rates for African-American male students, improving attendance rates for African-American male students, improving middle school holding power. What we found was there was a big disconnect that was accelerated in middle school where our kings, our Black boys were really beginning to disengage in school and engage in other things in middle school. So a heavy emphasis around school culture at the middle school level. As well as looking at reducing suspension rates, as well as reducing incarceration rates. Well, we're 6 years, 4 months into that journey. We've reduced suspension rates by 47% as an ecosystem for African-American males, have improved the graduation rate for Black boys by 20%. We've recruited 47% more African-American male teachers, as well as been able to embed and seed 7 African-centered classes that fulfill the high school graduation requirements for Oakland Unified School District. And this sort of targeted strategy has shown to the ecosystem that when you focus on those furthest from opportunity, not only does it accelerate the academic performance for that specific group, it actually improves the condition, the culture, the system, and the structure for success for all students. And so just recently in July, we actually created the Office of Equity, where we've now since hired a director of African-American girls and young women. We'll be hiring Latina academic achievement director, as well as a director focused on the needs of Asian Pacific Islanders as well. Those directors will then continue to develop these targeted strategies as a way to accelerate academic achievement for those students, and then inform the system on how we create a system of care for those students who the system has marginalized.
I'm already inspired, and we've only gotten through not even all of the introductions yet. So, and then Justin, I know you introduced yourself earlier, but if there's anything else you'd like to add.
No, let's keep it rolling.
Okay. So, oops. So with today's question, a lot with EDU on Air, what we've seen today is a lot of it was focused on curriculum best practices, instructional best practices as it relates to classroom technology. So the question that we wanted to pose to our panelists today is kind of thinking about, let's say that each student has access to the best technology and the best curricular resources. Looking at it from the lens of racial justice and the work that you guys are all leading, does that ensure every student succeeds? So with access to the best learning and classroom tools, does that make sure that we have success for every student?
Are we just kind of jumping in, or how?
Jump in, yes.
I mean, I'll take an initial crack. I mean, the analogy I'll use is, I mean, you can have many books in your home and still not necessarily be smart, so to speak. So to the degree of which we have our youth have access to technology, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to access that technology in a way that's going to manifest their own personal development, one. And then two, I think, how they access technology, we have to inspire them. We have to engage them in such a way that they use and leverage then that technology that's going to lift up their cultural prosperity, that's going to allow them to leverage that technology in a way that's going to support them, their family, and their community. And I think that takes engagement, it takes education, it takes humility, it takes listening to youth. And so I'll just start off by making sure that not only is it important for our children to have access, but access with purpose, access with conviction, access with culture, I think is very important.
Hear, hear. Just to sort of follow up on what Chris was saying. So yes, I think we all agree that, and I want to give a nod to, let's just be clear that not all of our Black and brown children do now have access to high quality technology. So I want to make sure that we understand that the access piece is not solved yet, right? That we still have a lot of schools that don't have access to the connectivity. And we know that that digital divide still has not been bridged for a lot of our students who, and particularly for our students who are attending schools that are serving primarily Black and brown kids. So that being said, we do know and understand that access is not enough. And as Chris was saying, we need to have access to digital knowledge. So the knowledge that allows them to engage in productive, creative, and lifelong activities rather than just simply consuming passive content. And I think the other piece for me that's really important, it's not just access to technology. We need to give them access to the knowledge that allows them to create technology and not just consume technology, right? So our students, our children, they live in our communities. They have the answers to some of the solutions, and they have the answers to some solutions for which technology would be a good tool. So the next step of this is giving them access to technology, but also allowing them to develop technology content so that they can use that technology and they can create solutions so that they can be entrepreneurs and create technology tools that will allow them to both sort of be part of their liberation and their resistance.
No. I mean, I think that one of the challenges that I think mistakes that our field continues to make is this kind of perpetual search for the silver bullet or the panacea. David Tyack, who's at Stanford, wrote a book in 1974, called The One Best System, where he sort of critiqued the U.S. educational approach to McDonaldize schools. And so I don't care what you put in there. If you said, does access to the best anything ensure every student succeeds? My answer is the same, no. Because there are so many factors that go into what it means for a student to succeed. Now, what we do know from the research and from practice is that we actually have a pretty high level of clarity and clarity both in terms of practice and research about what that formula is that guarantees that. Well, there's never a guarantee, but that makes it highly likely that a student succeeds. And technology is a piece of that, right? And it always has been. Access to sort of cutting edge tools and resources has always been a piece of that. But I think that this idea that we're going to drop one-to-one laptop programs in front of kids, or that we're going to, have high-speed internet in every school and then suddenly kids are going to be like super directed in their learning, and it's absurd. And it ignores a broader set of structural inequities that I think are really at the core of why school outcomes are so incredibly predictable. And yet there's no widespread panic nationally about that predictability because of how that predictability shakes out. So predictability for school success is also very clear in this nation. We know in September, with an incredibly high level of accuracy, who's going to do well in school in June and who's not. And the reason that we can be fairly sure from a sociological analysis that this is reflective of a deeper, embedded, racist, classist, homophobic, patriarchal society is that if in June, wealthy white children did as well in school as poor and working class black and brown children did, or have done historically, and black and brown children did as well in school as wealthy white kids. In other words, if the achievement paradigm were inverted, there would be national panic. But the fact that there's no national panic, it's not seen as a crisis, that generations of black and brown and poor white children too, right? Go to the Appalachians and you see really similar academic outcomes for those predominantly poor, multi-generational white kids. Mm-hmm. The fact that there is no widespread national panic, that this isn't seen as a national crisis, is suggestive of the fact that we've normed it, right? So if we infuse technology in schools, does that matter? Of course it matters. If don't start thinking about what is the purpose of public schools in a pluralistic, multiracial democracy, and how can we have such widespread, profound inequity in this nation state, if we have free schooling for 13 years, it suggested to me that there's something going on in schools that is actually norming and perpetuating widespread inequity across the nation. And if we don't address that, then I don't care what we put in. We can put in, highly credentialed teachers. We can put in technology. We put state-of-the-art buildings. And at the end of the day, if we're not addressing the broader structural inequalities in our society, then we'll keep getting the same outcomes. And so I'll just wrap my piece by saying that for me, the real question is when is the state of public education in this nation going to be a real national crisis such that we respond in a way that is suggestive that we do believe that every student can succeed?
I think you guys can see already 20 minutes in why it's so important for Google to be partnered with leaders like the ones you're hearing from today, because I think oftentimes we overestimate the ability of technology to sort of raise all boats. And in fact, technology oftentimes just amplifies underlying forces. So all the things that Jeff's talking about, some of that structural racism, structural inequity, technology can actually serve to widen that gap rather than narrow it if you're not really intentional with how you deploy it. It's a powerful force, technology is, but you've got to use it in the right ways. And you can look at the example of television, for instance, where, I mean, decades ago, a lot of people thought television was going to be some sort of equalizing access to opportunity and educational force. And it seems silly to even talk about television in that way today. So it really takes leaders like the ones we're hearing from today to figure out how does technology not just serve to even exacerbate the gap that already exists.
And then one thing I wanted to add to that as well, too, as you're mentioning, kind of like, you know, the whole push for one-to-one, get the devices in the hands of every student, and with the Common Core testing and standardized assessments, we actually see that students of color still underperforming even with the access and technology. So curious from each of your perspectives, is technology actually increase or kind of widening that achievement gap, or how is it exposing kind of what's happening there?
And I would be curious, particularly as you think about things like Khan Academy or, you know, other technologies like that you guys are seeing in your districts and classrooms, like, are those things being utilized by your students as much as they might be utilized by students in wealthier schools and districts?
No, they're not. And I think that my response to the kind of second tier question is that it kind of goes back to the historical narrative that I was lifting up earlier. You're right. I mean, most of the data suggests that the infusion of technology into poor and working class schools that are serving predominantly students of color and historically unsuccessful schools has had little to no impact. But we've seen this technology infusion fail in the same way for decades now. I mean, there was the idea of the multicultural education movement, right? That suddenly, like, you know, Black kids were going to have access to the autobiography of Malcolm X, and Latino kids were going to have access to the house on Mango Street, and suddenly they were going to love reading. But we didn't change anything about the structure of school. We didn't change anything about the pedagogy. We just changed the technology. We changed, right, the book that was in front of a kid, and they didn't suddenly love reading. And the reason for that goes back to my earlier comment, which is we're not having the real conversation about what is the purpose of school in a pluralistic, multiracial democracy. And then what is the purpose of school inside of a radically unequal pluralistic multiracial democracy. Okay? And I think if we don't have a conversation about technology for what, then it will just put it in front of kids and assume that magic bullet is suddenly going to make kids engage and jump all over Khan Academy and suddenly become, you know, learn calculus and it won't, right? And the data that you just cited is clearly suggestive of that. And if we project out in 10 years, the data will look the same. Technology is not going to save us. We're going to have to start having much more serious and complex conversations about what the role of public schools are in this nation, and particularly how that role needs to be different in a community like East Oakland than, say, in a wealthier community like Piedmont. Those schools shouldn't look the same. They shouldn't be operating the same. Those kids come to school with a very different set of needs. And it doesn't mean you lower the bar. It doesn't mean you lower the expectations. Instead, it means you understand the material conditions in which kids live, and you create a school environment, a pedagogy, and a curriculum that's actually responsive to that. And that's rigor. Okay, that's what it means to be intellectually and academically rigorous. It is not intellectually and academically rigorous to have the same curriculum for every child at the same grade in every city. That's not rigor. Okay? That's repetition. And those are not the same things.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in. I mean, Jeff is spot on, and I think a couple of things that I'll look at it. We look at it. The Calvary is not coming. We're not looking at anyone outside of our community, or even the work that we're doing to reimagine a new system. And so the folks that are in our department, and I feel the culture keepers that are looking at revolutionizing education, are really working from the context that Brother Jeff has kind of deeply framed. And so what I'll say is, we're trying to generate the next we're trying to educate the next generation of revolutionaries. And to the degree of we can put in front of our kings and queens, our students, the tools necessary for the personal transformation required to represent self, represent family and community, to reimagine a new public school system and a community that puts their interests up front. I think that's what we're trying to do, knowing that's slow, knowing, again, I couldn't say anything to debate or disagree with Brother Jeff, but I also feel that we have to, on the one hand, lift up the reality of what we're in, but we also have to insert conviction and hope in such a way that we inspire our children and those folks who acknowledge what Brother Jeff's saying, but also then empower them to do something different. And to that end, I engaged Brother Justin, a few years ago, gave him a dream, and the brother supported that dream by allowing us to create an African-centered, STEM-focused career pathway where African-American men are engaged with African-American boys and really reimagining a new academy that at its core is around personal transformation, and then partnering up with other brothers like Brandon with Hidden Genius Project to understand technology as a way of personal transformation. And so I think we are trying to leverage those tools in such a way to deconstruct this system that wasn't created for the 21st century children. And so we'll remain hopeful, but we have to do this in partnership and, through brothers like Jeff, Drea and Alex and Justin. I will remain hopeful, as I just came back from Louisville, Kentucky, where folks at the Muhammad Ali Center were having similar conversations on how you use technology. And it was humbling in an intergenerational conversation, the ideas that our youth are putting forward. And I also think to the degree that we leverage what our youth are sharing with us on how to use those tools as a way for revolution, as a way to engage our youth. I think we have to support them and get those tools in front of them as well.
And one thing I did want to do, so we did have a lot of great feedback and comments from those that are viewing today. But one question that I did want to pose to the group comes from one of our viewers. Says, how do we have these conversations when those who you work with don't see the problem?
Well, one of the other grantees for this racial justice work that you guys are doing, Brian Stevenson, talks about proximity. And I think that that's right, that if you've got a lot of people that are attempting to design solutions for our communities that are not proximate to the pain in our communities, and that distance from the pain and that distance from the suffering then creates a set of solutions that aren't actually at the heart of the matter. They're convenient for the people creating the solutions. And so I think that you need to encourage, if you're really trying to have these conversations in wherever it is that you're doing the work, you can't have them in a boardroom, right? You need to be proximate to the actual group and community and suffering and hope alongside of that suffering that is so present in our communities. And not only will it inspire you, but it'll allow you to see that actually, as Chris said, that we don't need someone from outside to come in and save us. Right? We have the capacity to do this work inside of our own communities. What we need is committed resources that aren't tied up with a bunch of strings. And that's what I love about the way in which the Racial Justice Project came into our community at Roses in Concrete. right? They came, they saw, they got proximate, and they said, how can we support you? Right? And when we narrated, it said, okay, we can get behind that. So I think that's really the first step, but it has to be consistent, right? It can't be voyeuristic where you go into the hood and you get this like momentary hood experience.
Yeah.
It has to be a constant part of the conversation, and you can pull back out of that and really debrief and talk about what you saw and experienced. But it has to be a continued reentry into that proximity so that you're making sure that whatever it is that you're coming up with makes sense for the people that you're actually trying to serve.
Right.
Yep.
And then Justin, this might be a question or geared towards you. It said, aside from Google's focus on data on CS education efforts, is there an effort to bring this conversation, the focus on racial justice, into more/other Google trainings or even teacher professional development?
Well, one of the things we're really cognizant of at google.org is that while we want to be supporting the folks in the community, Google is not the company to go in and directly hack these problems, right? I mean, Jeff was talking about the importance of proximity and just being cognizant of the fact that Google is not the most proximate group to the community most effective. So what we're really trying to do is get proximate ourselves, but then find those solutions like the African American Male Achievement Program, like Roses in Concrete, like Beyond 12, and lift those up and supercharge them, right? So I'll lift up Beyond 12 as an example where 2 years ago, we had a small seed investment to help Alex digitize some of the work that she was doing with young people. And just this year, we invested another $1 million in her work to try to scale it across the country and really figure out how do we bring this to as many people as we possibly can. So I think we're really seeing our role as kind of that innovative DNA that powers Google. Like, how do we take that into the community and lift up the leaders who are most proximate, who are doing the real work, who are the same kind of innovative entrepreneurs that the founders of our company are, but are tackling the problem. So I don't think you're going to see Google directly in the schools training people, but hopefully we're lifting up the innovators like Chris, Alex, and Jeff, and giving them the resources, not just money, but also our time, talent, our technology, to be able to make sure that they're able to do their work to maximum scale and maximum effectiveness.
Mm-hmm. And I know we're almost up, but I'm going to wrap it up with one more question from the audience. Make sure you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. So this question says, thank you for the conversation. It's very important right now. Where can this conversation continue? What books, blogs would you recommend for educators to access to learn more about and address educational equality issues?
So I'll go ahead and just sort of suggest and give a shout out to a couple of folks that I know are doing really wonderful work around conversations about race and equity. So there's an organization called Race Forward that puts on their annual conference, right, Facing Race. So I would say that's a good place to start. They have wonderful blogs. They've started lots of good conversations. It's not just focused on educators, but definitely focused on providing folks with a framework to be able to have that conversation. Because I think a lot of the challenges that we have when we're talking about this is we're so not comfortable talking about just race and racial equity. We tend to want to sort of combine it with the other isms. And rather than doing that, it's really creating a space and an opportunity for us to say, we're going to face race. We're going to talk about race right now outside of the context of some of the other conversations that we know need to happen. So I'm going to sort of call them up as an organization and as having resources that are probably good first steps for educators or other people who are really looking to for solutions about how to have these conversations and these difficult conversations about race.
And maybe quickly before, I'd really love to hear Jeff and Chris, you guys' thoughts on this. Maybe one little wrinkle to that question I'd be curious to hear your perspective on is, for people who do want to get proximate, right? What's the best way for them to do that? I mean, you guys, I don't think have the capacity to have thousands of people, trying to come through your programs. Maybe you do, tell us if you do. But what is the right, authentic way? Because Jeff, I mean, you also mentioned sort of this voyeuristic thing you want to avoid. We don't want people going on sort of poverty tours in urban neighborhoods just to sort of like watch. So what's the right way for people to get engaged? And I think some of that work starts internally first, but once people are maybe getting themselves right internally, what's a good way for them to really get that proximity?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we would love 1,000 committed volunteers that were going to be present in our community and our young people's lives. So please feel free, and that's I'm actually being real in terms of one place you can come is come to Roses in Concrete.
You did get some school tour requests, so that's
okay.
Good.
Cool. Yeah. So come and see. I think that one of the reasons we designed ourselves as a lab school is because seeing is believing, and I think in this country we need. One of my favorite Cornel West quotes is, "There is no affirmation through negation," and I think that what has happened with progressives and liberals in general, but the country writ large, is we've gotten really good at tearing things down. And I think our national election was a really good example of that this year. We've gotten really good at critique. But what I'm more interested in is what are we affirming? What are we actually building that is a viable alternative to what's not working? And so I would say seek out spaces where there's not just critique, but there's actually work going on that you can first get a flavor for what's possible. Then I would say that it really is about getting in where you fit in, but also coming in as a humble servant. So really learning how to listen first about what is needed, and then where do your skill sets align with what's actually needed, as opposed to coming in and asserting, well, this is what these kids need, and this is what this community, and what actually might be needed is you might actually have to walk around and pick up trash. You might actually have to, hold a child's hand and walk them into the garden and let them calm down. And I think that sense that people from the outside are going to come in and fix it for us is not the right approach. That folks that are coming into this space need to come in ready to listen and learn and serve humbly in whatever way makes the most sense. And for a lot of us in our community, that's the first litmus test, is that we'll put you on some work that don't nobody else want to do. Just to see, why are you really here? Are you down to bend down and pick up trash?
That's right.
Because once we see that humility, then we'll give you access to our babies. But if you come in and just think that we're just going to put you in front of our youth, our most prized and valued a treasure in our communities, right? Those days are long gone. The organization, I would suggest that people check. I mean, my reading list is long, and so I would just say email me, because I like to give targeted readings based on what you really want to dive into. So folks can email me. I'm happy to make recommendations based on what your particular interest is. But one organization that I'll lift up, and then I'll mute, is an organization called Free Minds, Free People, who, for my money, is having the most aggressive and direct conversations about race, about racial justice, and about what it means for educators to really support each other, to transform classrooms and schools toward really profound conversations in that direction. They have a national conference every year that rotates around the country, and I would say, just check out their website and dip in their conference. And you don't have to be a teacher to go and learn about the ways in which, we're all educators, right? So you don't have to be a classroom teacher to begin to learn about the ways in which we can shift this conversation in our country.
Yeah, and I'll just share real briefly. Brother Jeff was spot on. I really appreciate listening with humility. I think listening with story in mind, and I would say this, an opportunity to go to school board meetings, sit in classrooms, sit in PTA meetings, go to school site council meetings, go to central office meetings, but begin to orientate yourself with the justice and the injustice of what is happening in public school systems. But I like everything that Brother Jeff said. We've been given, 2 ears and 1 mouth, so listen twice, speak once. Listen without judgment, listen to understand. But to that end, if we could listen with other people's story in mind and being gracious in that, I think can be a powerful entry point. And an organization, 2 organizations that I would lift up. One is this language of equity is just very fluid and dynamic. And I think we talk about equity and people have many different interpretations and identifications of what equity is. And so the WKKF Foundation, Kellogg Foundation, actually has a great and a robust website where you could begin to define many of those words, so you just the viewer, the listener can begin to at least understand the language of equity. And then an organization that's very near and dear to my heart has been working alongside Oakland Unified School District for some time, and definitely has been one of my coaches, are the National Equity Project, who work around deconstructing institutional racism and really aligning and lifting up the assets within a community on what to do difference to create equitable outcomes for those children where the data shows they're not hitting the mark. And so definitely would encourage folks to look at the Kellogg's Foundation and National Equity Project for resources to learn more about what's happening around racial equity.
All right. Whew, heavy topic to discuss, but definitely want to thank everyone for all of the insights that you shared and really encouraging us to think about the tough questions that we have before us when it comes to really addressing the challenges, the systemic barriers within education. So definitely appreciate all the insights that you guys have shared. And so for those that were asking on how to stay connected with our speakers, in the session materials that were included in the agenda, you have access to how to stay connected with the work that they're doing. And then we'll also make sure to include some of those email addresses so we can get the reading materials from Jeff. And for those that are also on the line as well, you also get professional development hours by filling out the form in the Hangout. So for those that have joined in, definitely make sure you take advantage of that. And with any questions on that, you can reach out to me directly as well. Happy to help with that. And I know we were about 15 minutes over our time, so definitely want to say thank you to our speakers for your time. I feel that we could almost have a full EDU on air day dedicated to this topic. So Justin will have to work on seeing how we can make that happen. But again, thank you guys for all the work that you're continuing to do, and looking forward to staying connected and plugged into what you're doing. And again, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Peace, everyone.
Thanks.
Always good to be with you guys.